Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And also Shabbat Shalom to those online. I hope I hit the right button for the streaming, the live streaming. And we hope that you'll be able to follow the service this evening. It's a delight to have you with us. And we hope that you've been having a good summer, a calm, relaxing summer in the face of everything that's been besetting our world. So I'm going to invite Sue to join me in leading in the singing, but we hope that you'll all join in. And we're going to begin on page 647 in the Siddur Mishkan Tefillah, 647, at the foot of the page with Ozi v'Zimrat. Ozi v'Zimrat Vayehi Lishua. 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 Didn't you sound beautiful? That was lovely. You'd like to turn to page 130? We will be returning in a short while to the rear of the book, the song anthology, but for now, the first of the group of psalms that's traditionally read as part of Kabbalat Shabbat, the welcoming of the Sabbath, is Psalm 95. L'chuna ranana l'Adonai, naria litzur yeshenu, nikadma fanav b'todah, bizmirot naria lo. Come, let us sing joyously to God. Raise a shout for our rock and deliverer. Let us come into God's presence with praise. Let us raise a shout for God in song. Ki el gadol Adonai umelech gadol al kol Elohim, asher biado mechkerei aretz v'toafot harim lo, asher lo hayam v'hu asahu, v'yabeshet yadav yatsaru. Bo'u nishtachave v'nichra'a nivracha lefnei Adonai Yoseinu, ki hu Eloheinu v'anachnu am marito v'tzon yado, hayom im bekolot tishma'u. Come, let us bow down and kneel, bend the knee before God our Maker, for the Eternal One is our God, and we are the people God tends, the flock in God's hand. Oh, if you would but heed God's charge this day, this Shabbat day. And if you'd like to turn to page 137 for the concluding lines of these verses, these psalms, it's in Psalm 29. Adonai oz la'amo yiten, Adonai yevolech et amo v'shalom. May God grant strength to our people. May God grant our people peace. Le'amo yiten Adonai yevolech et amo. Adonai oz la'amo yiten Adonai yevolech et amo. Adonaios Le'amo Yiten Adonai Yivarech et Amo Adonaios Le'amo Yiten Adonai Yivarech et Amo Shalom. 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 Let's turn again to the rear of the book on page 636, 636. For Yidid Nefesh, we'd like to sing the opening verse, the first verse, the last verse of the 4 verses given here, and then the refrain at the conclusion, the words of which will be very simple for you to follow. Yidid Nefesh Av Harachaman Meshol Chavdecha El Ritzonecha Yarutz Avdecha Kemo Ayal Yishtachaveh El Mul Hadarecha Ya'erav Lo Yedidotecha Minof Etzuf V'chol Ta'am Higalena Ufros Chavidi Alai Etzukat Shalomecha Ta'ir Eretz Mikvodecha Nagila V'nismecha Bach Naher Ahuv Kiva Moed V'choneinu Kimei Olam Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai 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 dai 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 Yai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai dai Yai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai dai dai. On page 138, we welcome Shabbat as a bride with Lecha Dodi. And I hope this is a version that's familiar to some of you. Lecha Dodi, Lecha Kalai, Yalalai, 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 Pnei Shabbat, Nekabela. Lecha Dodi, Lecha Kalai, Yalalai, 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 Pnei Shabbat, Nekabela. Shamol v'zachol b'dibur echad, השמיענו אל המיוחד. אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה. Hey, la 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 da 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 ya da da ya da 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 Pnei Shabbat nekabela lechad dodi lekrakalai ya la la ya da da ya da da Pnei Shabbat nekabela lekrat Shabbat lechuvan elecha כי היא מקור הברכה, מראש מקדם ניסוחה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. היי לך דודי לקרק עלי ידדי 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 פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקרק עלי ידדי 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 פני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי התעוררי כי באורך ומאורי אורי אורי שיר דברי כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. היי לך דודי לקרק עלי ידדי 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 פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקרק עלי ידדי 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 פני שבת נקבלה. Verse 8 לידי ימין ושמאל תפרוצי ואת אדוני תריצי. על יד איש בן פצי ונשמחה ונגילה. היי לך דודי לקרק עלי ידדי 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 פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקרק עלי ידדי 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 פני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצולה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי לקרק עלי ידדי 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 פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקרק עלי ידדי 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 פני שבת נקבלה. Now we're going to light the Shabbat candles as you remain standing. So I haven't actually invited anyone to do this. Yes, good idea. So before we light the candles, I'd like to welcome again all of you here, but especially our guests who come just for this occasion from Wellington in New Zealand. And as you do, yes. So I'd like to invite Sue and David to come forward and light the Shabbat candles for us.
ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו, ציוונו להדליק נר של שבת.
Amen. Shabbat Shalom. And Shabbat Shalom to all of you. If you'd like to turn to the person next to you or behind you and wish them Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you very much. That was lovely.
And now those who are in the front rows can see that we actually do have quite a congregation here with us this evening. They snuck in while you weren't watching. And on page 140, Psalm 92, Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbat, a song for the day of Shabbat. Tov lehodot l'Adonai, ulezamer l'shemcha elyon. Tov lehodot l'Adonai, ulezamer l'shemcha elyon. Lahagid baboker chazdecha ve'emunatecha baleilot. Tov lehodot l'Adonai ulezamer l'shemcha elyon. Tov lehodot l'Adonai ulezamer l'shemcha elyon. Alei asor v'alei navel alei higayon b'chinor. Tov lehodot l'Adonai ulezamer l'shemcha elyon. Tov lehodot l'Adonai ulezamer l'shemcha elyon. Ki simchtani Adonai b'fa'olecha b'ma'asei yadecha aranen. Ma gadlu ma'asecha Adonai, ma'od amaku machshavotecha. Ma modeda uksil, lo yavin et zot. Tzadikata ma'yifach, ke'ez balabanon yizkeh. Shetolim bebeit Adonai bechatzot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenuvon b'seva d'shenim Verananim Yehu Lahagid Ki Ashar Adonai Sori Velo Avlata Bo. Adonai malach geut lavesh, lavesh Adonai oz hitazal. Av tikon tevel baltimot, nachon kisecha me'az, me'olam ata. Nasa'u neharot Adonai, nasa'u neharot kolam, yisa'u neharot doch yam. Mikolot mayim rabim, adirim mishbereyam, adir b'marom Adonai, edotecha ne'emnu ma'od, Levetecha na'ava kodesh, Adonai lo'orech yamim. Above the thunder of the mighty waters, more majestic than the breakers of the sea, is the Eternal One, majestic on high. Your decrees are indeed enduring. Holiness befits your house, O God, for all times. If you'd like to stand, please, for the Chatzi Kaddish, the Reader's Kaddish, which is on page 144. Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah v'halma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael Bagala, Bagala, Ubisman Kariv, Ve'emaru, Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabba Mevorach, Le'alam Ulal Me'al Maya. Yitbawach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'a v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadav v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha barechu le'elam in kol bechata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata ta'amiran b'yalma v'emaru Amen. Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Praise be the Eternal One, to whom praise is due, now and forever. Please be seated as we continue on page 148. And let's read this together in the Hebrew. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, b'chokhmah poteach she'arim, u'v'tvona meshane etim, u'machalif et hazmanim, u'misader et hakochavim, b'mishmoroteihem barakia kirtsono, borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or, uma'avil yom u'mevi layla, uma'avdil ben yom u'ben layla, Adonai tzvaot shemo. El chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv aravim. On page 150. Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael Amcha ahavata Amcha ahavata Torah u'mitzvot Chukim u'mishpatim Otanu limadeta, Otanu limadeta. Al ken Adonai Eloheinu b'shokbeinu, u'v'kumenu nasiach b'chukecha, v'nismach b'divrei toratecha, u'b'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu ubahem nehege yomam v'layla nehege yomam v'layla ve'ahavatecha al tasir mimenu le'olamim Baruch atah Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha v'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. V'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'beitecha ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל, ואמרת עליהם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת. והיה לכם לציצית, וראיתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם. ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. On page 157, standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. On page 158, Mihi kamocha bailim Adonai, Mihi kamocha nedal bakodesh, Nora tehilot o seifele, Nora tehilot o seifele, Malachutecha ra'u banecha, Bokei hayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, Ze'eli anu ve'amru, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. V'ne'emar kifad Adonai et Yaakov, u'galo miyad chazak mimenu, Baruch ata Adonai Gal Yisrael. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, v'ha'amidenu malkeinu l'chaim, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, v'takanenu be'etzah tova milfanecha, v'hoshienu l'ma'an shemecha, v'hagen ba'adenu v'haser me'aleinu, oyev, devel, v'cherev, v'ra'av v'yagon, v'harchek mimenu avon v'fesha, ובצל כנפיך תסתירנו, כי אל שומרנו ומצילנו אתה, כי אל חנון ורחום אתה, ושמור צאתנו ובואנו, לחיים ולשלום, מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני, הפורס סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל, ועל ירושלים. For you, God, watch over us and deliver us. For you, God, are gracious and merciful. Guard our going out and our coming in, to life and to peace, forevermore. Blessed are you, Eternal One, whose shelter of shalom, of peace, is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Jerusalem. On page 162. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני, עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. And having sung the song that reminds us that the tefillah that we're about to recite is a special tefillah for Shabbat, as if we would have forgotten that. But the service, our tefillah, is filled with helpful reminders to us like that. We now rise, and on page 164, we will begin the tefillah. As always, we'll recite the first few brachot together, and then we'll be carrying on at our own speed, with our own prayer, in our own fashion. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor B'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol, V'Zocher Chasei Avot V'Emahot, U'Mevi Geula Livnei B'neihem, Le'ma'an Shemo B'Yahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ve'ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayei Metim Atah, Rab Lahoshia. Mashiv Haruach U'Morid HaGeshem, Mazriach HaShemesh U'Morid HaTal. Mechalkel Chayim B'Chesed, Mechayei Metim V'Rachamim Rabim. Somech Noflim V'Rofei Cholim, U'Matir Asurim, U'Mukayem Emunato Lishenei Afar. Mi Chamocha Bal Gevurot, U'Mido Melach, Melech Meimit U'Mechayei, U'Matzmiach Yeshua. V'ne'eman atah l'chayot meitim. Baruch atah Adonai mechayei hametim. Atah kadosh v'shemcha kadosh, u'kdoshim b'chol yom yahalelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh. body, in the words of our mouths, and the meditations of our hearts, be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our redeemer. Say shalom b'mromav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, amen. Say shalom b'mromav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. You know, there are two things that through my career I've learned not to allow to bother me. One is hearing the phone ring in the synagogue. Of course, there was that time when the uncle of the bar mitzvah, while standing on the bima, took out his phone to make a call. That was probably a step too far, shall we say. A ringing tone too far, we'll say. And the other thing is having people sing different melodies to mine. Because now that I've been spending quite a bit of time up at the Leo Beck Center, I've learned to sing everything that we sing, but in a different way. Just those slight changes. So that doesn't bother me either at all. You just have to learn to live with diversity of stance, of opinion, of practice, don't you? Really, if you're going to survive this world, as much of a perfectionist as you may be, you just have to be able to accept that other people may be different, think differently, and have different opinions to one's own. The world is not a black and white place. It's very, very multicolored. And I say, thank God for it. And so does Jewish tradition. This week's portion is the first portion in the book of Shabbat, the book of Exodus. It's just packed with great drash material and lots of interesting things to talk about. We'll be talking about some of them tomorrow. But there's one verse that really struck me this year. And it's the beginning of the story of how Moses appears before the burning bush. You remember the bush that was burning but not consumed, and gets his charge, his directions from God to go and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. That's what we'll be reading about tomorrow. But the opening verse of this is very interesting. It says, now Moses, who was a shepherd tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, drove the flock into the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Only that translation isn't quite correct. The Hebrew says, Achar Hamidbar, which doesn't mean into the wilderness, it means beyond the wilderness. Beyond the wilderness. Now this is a very curious phrase. Why would a shepherd tending their father-in-law's flock, not just their flock, but the flock of their father-in-law, take them beyond the arable world, the worlds of pastures and green grass where the flocks could really thrive, and past the midbar, the wilderness. In other words, what was he doing out there anyway? So far away from, as we might say, rural civilization, domesticated farms and so forth. And I'm not the only one who asked that question. Jewish tradition also is curious about this passage. And I've come up, following the Chumash published by the Masorti, the conservative movement in the United States, I've come up with 3 different explanations for what that phrase, Achar HaMidbar, is referring to. So the first place we always go when we want to know what Jewish tradition says about something is Rabbi Shlomo ben Yitzchak, Rashi. Lived in the 11th century in France and also in Germany a bit. Now, Rashi was a businessman. He worked in the wine trade. He would have fitted in very well in Mornington Peninsula. He'd be going to our pop-up service right now. If he was progressive. He wasn't. He was very traditional. And so his answer to this is particularly interesting, and I think a posit. Rashi says something I bet none of you have thought of. He says, Moses took the flocks on the other side of the wilderness to ensure that they did not graze on someone else's land. In other words, to avoid what he calls gazal, or theft. Now that's a very halakhic approach, a legalistic approach, and that's what we would expect from Rashi, actually. But it also reflects his own concerns, because he's a businessman, and he knows that intruding on another person's property in that way would be a very serious misdemeanor. So for Rashi, this phrase is there in Torah to teach us that when we take our flocks out to graze, we should not allow them to graze on another person's property. As I said, you probably hadn't come up with that one yourselves. Another commentator by the name of Ovadia Sforno, who lived just at the cusp of the 15th to the 16th centuries in Italy, which had a big Jewish community back in those days, Sforno gives a different kind of explanation altogether. Sforno says what it means when it says that Moses took his flocks achar hamidbar on the other side of the wilderness is that he went out to meditate. And it's easier to meditate when you're out in the wilderness than when you're sitting in the city. We all know this is true because we know the behavior of mystics down through the ages who find some remote Himalayan mountaintop on which to meditate. Why do they go there? Not because they enjoy the cold necessarily, but because they want to avoid the crowds. It's easier for them to focus on what Abraham Joshua Heschel called the awesomeness of nature, the radical amazement of nature, than out in the wilderness than it is in the city. So Sforno clearly was influenced by Jewish mysticism, and that's the interpretation that he liked. He liked to see Moses not as a legal expert or a businessman, as Rashi did, but as a meditator, a mystic. And why would this fit Moses? Well, isn't this the Moses who's about to have a conversation with God? And wouldn't that explain better Moses' experience of the burning bush than the first explanation, Rashi's? Perhaps. The Midrash, which is earlier than these fellows, probably about the Midrash on Exodus is probably about the 8th, 9th centuries, maybe a little bit earlier. It has a different story altogether. It tells the story. It says, one of the lambs in Moses' flock raced off into the wilderness. Now Moses, if he was a normal shepherd, probably would have said, well, there's one gone. If it survives, that's great. If it doesn't, it's not my problem. I'm not accountable for everything. But Moses doesn't say this according to the Midrash. Indeed, Moses actually leaves the rest of the lambs who are contentedly grazing on someone else's property, presumably, and he rushes off into the wilderness, not to meditate, as Sforno would have it, but to rescue this poor lamb, who, as it happens, falls down a ravine and gets caught in the thicket at the bottom of the ravine. And Moses climbs down, cuts this lamb out of the thicket, and carries him back to the flock. What does this tell us about Moses? That Moses is a compassionate, caring leader who will not let even one of his flock go astray. The perfect leader for the Jewish people as they begin their trek across the wilderness a bit later. Now there, 3 totally different interpretations, each one bringing out different aspects of the text. Can we say that any one of them is more correct than the others? Can we indeed say any one of them is wrong? We cannot. Why? Because it's all a matter of context. Now, we've recently heard that word used a lot in relation to the war that's going on right now in Gaza. Context. I think most people who use the term are using it incorrectly. But here, Jewish tradition teaches us the correct use of the word context. It means that in different situations we see things differently. That there are different points of view, and all of them may have some merit, though some may have more merit than others. It depends on our context as readers, how we understand this text, what speaks more vibrantly, more immediately to us. But just because one interpretation speaks loudly to us doesn't mean we can simply dismiss the others, because there may be someone out there for whom it matters. And all of life is a matter of finding out what the other person is really seeing when they're reading the text. And I'd like to suggest that this is as true for the situation we find ourselves in today as it was for those ancient Jewish people. As much as we might like to say, we are right and they are wrong, and that's the end of the matter. Black and white, that's it. I honestly don't think we can do that as human beings and as Jews. It doesn't mean we have to agree with the other. We can disagree with them vehemently. But in the end of the day, we can't simply say, they're wrong and we're right. We have to listen a bit. That's hard, very hard, very hard. But I think that's what we're called upon to do by reading such as this in this week's portion. Shabbat Shalom. Let's turn to page 586, the Aleinu, and let's rise and let's recite the second of the 2 paragraphs here. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. If you'd like to turn a couple of pages further on. It's harder when you're holding a microphone. Page 591. May we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding. Let's read this together. Loved each of us for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech, and may we never lift up our hand, but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas, and light up the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom ahu Yehyeh Adonai echad Ushamo echad. That's our dream, that the world will one day be unified under God. In the meantime, we have to keep our moral compass strictly on north, but we also have to listen to others. It's quite a challenge, quite a challenge. So we remain standing as we turn to the Kaddish Yatom, the Mourner's Kaddish, which is on page 598. At this time, we remember all those who have passed away. We certainly remember those who have passed away as a result of the dreadful attacks on the 7th of October, and all those who've passed away as a result of this war which has been waged subsequently within the Israel Defense Forces, those who've passed away, citizens in Israel, and also innocent citizens, indeed in all conflicts around the world. We think of all of them. We also think of those in the Shabbat, the first week since their passing, Barbara Zoland, Lorene Hall, and Esther Klein. Lorene Hall and Esther Klein are recent deaths. I'm not sure that they're still within the Shiva. We also think of those in the Shloshim, the first month since their passing. Penny Jakubowicz, Leonid Kamenetsky, Linda Bader, Ellis Edwards, Rabbi David Ellison, Peter Joseph, Bernard Rechtman, Gil Tidhar, Maria Wang, and Isaac Bergman. We think of those whose yahrzeits fall at this time, and particularly Joe Stupel. The first anniversary of his passing falls on the 6th of January. That's tomorrow, isn't it? Falls tomorrow. He was music director in this synagogue for more than 50 years and within the progressive movement here in Melbourne. And we miss him dearly. Another person whose first anniversary falls at this time is Yuri Yunev. And we also think of Rhonda Bernstein-Schulze, Ilse Breath, Bernard Goldberg, Louise Gray, Ivan Greenblatt, Lily Hellinger, Philip Kamler, Alex Kolb, Ethel Lipman, Robin Michelson, Ruth Nathan, Ilse Priester, Susan Raymond Ney-Fellner, Rudolph Rubin, Rebecca Sharman, Becky Sharp, Jacob Shaw, Gerda Shelton, Caroline Silberstein, Jean Splitter, Harry von Engel, Ruben Wasserteil, and Edith Marie Wicks. Are there any names I've left off this list anyone would like to mention? Our thoughts are with all of them as we recite Kaddish Yatom. Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabbah, ba'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'b'zman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevoach le'olam al'almei almaya, yitboach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'al v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadav v'yitaleh v'yithalal Shemei dikudesha bu'ichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran ba'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shalama Rabbah min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Ose Shalom Bimramav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu ve'al Kol Yisrael, ve'imru. Amen. May God, who causes peace to reign in the highest heavens, let this peace descend upon us, upon all Israel, upon all humanity, and let us say, Amen. You'd like to be seated, please? Now, I would love to call on a board member to come up and make some announcements, but I don't think our assigned board member is here this evening. Oh, which means you're kind of stuck with me. So here are some announcements for this Shabbat. First, we recognize the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional, thank you, the traditional owners of this land. I also recognize my wife, who feeds me by lines. Of course, we recognize their elders past and present, and elders emerging as well. There will be a service tomorrow morning in this very spot, beginning at 10 a.m. I'll be taking the service. You'll hear a different sermon. Before the service, there is our weekly Parashat Shavua session, where we study the Torah portion. It's a brilliant portion, and I welcome any of you who are able to get up for 9 o'clock start to join us in the Friedlander Hall for that. There are many more announcements, which you will find somewhere else. So I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and we're going to conclude our service with Shalom Aleichem on page 142. Traditionally Shalom Aleichem is said at the end of a service as people return home after attending synagogue. They sing it in the streets of places like Tzfat and Jerusalem. It's really beautiful. So we're going to sing it here in the synagogue to Debbie Friedman's melody. And then after that, we'll make Kiddush. Once again, it's wonderful having you all with us here this evening. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hashavet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Boachem l'shalom, Malachei Ashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hashavet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Barachuni l'shalom, Malachei Ashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hashavet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shuvachem. Shuvachem l'shalom, Malachei Ashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Thank you so much for your beautiful singing this evening as well. Would you like to rise, please, and turn to page 122, 123 for the Kiddush. And I'm going to do the full Kiddush this evening. We normally reduce it, shorten it a bit here at TBI, but I can't understand why, so we'll do the whole one. Maybe to save time. Yes, that's probably it. Yom HaShishi, Vayechulu Hashemayim v'haaretz v'chol tzibam, Vayechal Elohim bayom hashvi'i melachto asher asa, Vayishbot bayom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa, Vayavarach Elohim et yom hashvi'i, Vayakadesh oto, Ki vo Shabbat mikol melachto, Asher bawa Elohim la'asot savrei. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kadsho, b'ahava v'ratzon hinechilanu, zikaron le'maaseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila le'mikra'ei kodesh, zecher letziat Mitzrayim, ki banu v'chata b'otanu kidashta mikol hamim, v'shabbat kadshecha v'ahava uv'ratzon hinechaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha-Shabbat. Well, I've had mine, and now you're going to get yours. The light cup is grape juice, and the darker cup is sanctified wine. L'chaim. And two very large chalot here, which will have to be completely consumed, I think, this evening. So those of you on low-carb diets are going to have a ball here. Please join me. Bershut, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom to those of you online. We hope you've enjoyed our service this evening, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.